We're going to talk about Sukkot and the season of our joy. Okay? Now understand, before we get to Sukkot, let's back up a minute and let's briefly cover the spring Moedim. What are the spring Moedim about? And we know these are prophetic, yes? All of these things reveal the Messiah and a different aspect of his coming and his life and what he's done for us. So the spring testifies of when he came. It's about redemption. It's about walking with him. It's about now having a sinless life and learning to walk with him. And then Shavuot and the pouring out of his presence and the walking with his people and all things coming together. Then we have this time in between, this summer, where it's hot and it's weary and it's tiring and man, these days are long and right? And then something happens. Yom Teruah. Yom Teruah is just this loud thing, it's this blast of the shofar. It's an alarm. It's a crying out. Prepare the way. The king is coming. So now we're getting into these fall festivals that are talking about, so when the Messiah returns, what's going to happen? And it's going to be this loud thing. Believe me, everyone's going to know it. Okay? And so here it is. Prepare the way. The king is coming. Make way. Get ready to meet him. And when he comes, he's going to judge. And when he judges, he's looking to see if you have been atoned for, if atonement has been provided for you, if you have received the atonement that he has given, the atonement that he has provided. And then what happens after that? Sukkot. We're going to talk a little bit about Sukkot tonight and how this relates to the Messiah and some practical application of it as well. Because so many times we look through the things of the Scripture and we kind of like just spiritualize things and we don't look at the practical application. I mean, if he gives us his word, yes, there are things that he's revealing spiritually, but isn't there things in there he wants us to actually do? And so this is what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. So how all these things are revealed, how the Messiah is revealed, and what the Father's desire for us is in this time. I mean, Sukkot is often called the season of our joy. Well, what about all the other festivals? Why would this one be called the season of our joy? There's something it implies, and I'll kind of cut to the chase, and then we'll go back and cover some things. Guys, this is when we dwell with him forever. This is when we come in, and now we're with him. It is a new time, a new season, a new beginning of forever. And this is to dwell with him and to be with him. If you want to call this kind of implies the wedding feast. So this is what we're looking at. And thus we shall be with him forever. Wow. So let's go back and let's look and see what the Scripture has to say about it, and let's see what the Father's going to reveal. You ready? All right? Go. So before we start, there's one thing I want you to pay attention for in the midst of this, because I'm not going to stop and point out every time, okay? But pay attention to the connections between Sukkot, life, and water. Now understand, without water, what's going to happen to you? You'll die. I don't care if you live in a desert or not. Without water, you can't live. Okay? Now, add in there, you live in a desert. You need water. Water is for life. Okay? And there's a reason why Yeshua says, I am the living water. Because can we truly live without him? Right? So, as we go through these things, pay attention to there are things that the Father has told us and given us that require water, that require life. And there was Sukkot. Why? Because in the time of Sukkot, like I said, is that time that we come and we dwell with him and we're with him forever. It's that new beginning, that new season, that new time that we're coming in together. Okay? All right. So, first Sukkot, what is it? Let's just kind of start at the very beginning. What is it? Okay, let's take a look. Go to Leviticus 23, verse 33. Adonai said to Moshe, tell the people of Israel, on the 15th day of the 7th month is the feast of Sukkot, for 7 days to who? To Adonai. One of the things to point out when we're talking about the Moedim, these are not the Jewish festivals, even though they've been the ones that have been faithful to observe them. Okay? They are the Moedim of Yah. They're his. And he allows us to partake in them. His desire is that we partake in them. Because why? These are times that he has set to meet with us. And guys, I don't know about you, but if I make an appointment, I expect people to keep it. Right? How much more when the one who created you makes an appointment with you? So he made appointments to meet with his people that we gather in together and that we observe these times. And so these are what's given. So you hold this festival 7 days to Adonai. On the first day there is to be a holy convocation. Do not do any kind of ordinary work. For 7 days you're to bring an offering made by fire to Adonai, and on the 8th day you're to have a holy convocation, bring an offering made by fire to Adonai. Is the day of what? Public assembly. Do not do any kind of ordinary work. So on the first day and on the last day, there are gathering times. We gather together and we observe together. We rejoice together. We have fun together, right? Hopefully. So what do we look? Verse 37. These are the designated times of who? Adonai. That you are to proclaim as what? Holy convocations. Again, these holy convocations means gathering, right? And bring an offering made by fire to Adonai, a burnt offering, a grain offering, a sacrifice, and the drink offerings, each on its own day, besides the Shabbats of Adonai, your gifts and your vows, your voluntary offerings that you give. But on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have what? Gathered the produce of the land, you are to observe the festival of Adonai for 7 days. The first day is to be a complete rest, and the 8th day is to be a complete rest. So without just coming around and saying these are Sabbaths, essentially it's kind of what they are. Okay, he's just saying it's time to not work, it's time to gather, it's time to be with one another, it's time to honor him in these days. Okay? So, verse 40. On the first day you are to take choice fruit, palm fronds, thick branches, river willows, and celebrate in the presence of Adonai your God for 7 days. You are to observe it as a feast to who? I know, right? Well, it seems kind of redundant. Well, you already said that, Pastor. Well, I'm not the one repeating myself. Okay? So to keep it in the presence of Adonai your God for 7 days, you are to observe it as feast of Adonai 7 days in the year. It is a permanent regulation. It is a what? Permanent regulation. How long? Generation after generation, and keep it in the 7th month. Verse 42. You are to live in Sukkot for 7 days. Every citizen of Israel is to live in a sukkah. This essentially means to dwell in a sukkah. Okay? So that generation after generation of you will know that I made the people of Israel live in Sukkot when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Adonai your God. Verse 44, thus Moshe announced to the people of Israel the designated times of Adonai. If you go back to Leviticus 23, you start at the beginning. They start with Shabbat, then the spring, and then going through, and then the fall, and this is what he's talking about. So these are the Moedim that the Father has given to us, okay? So when we read through that, what is the emphasis for the time that we're given? What does the Father want us to keep as the emphasis here? Well, let's look at it. Leviticus 23:42, you are to live in Sukkot for 7 days. Every citizen of Israel is to do what? Live in a sukkah. What's this say? So that, well, that implies there's something he wants us to see. There's something he wants us to know. There's something he wants us to learn here. So that what? Generation after generation of you will know that I made the people of Israel to live in Sukkot when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Adonai your God. Well, there's a lot to be said here. We are to dwell in Sukkot, right? That's plural for sukkah, by the way. You know, tabernacle, okay? We're to dwell in Sukkot so that we remember that when they came out of Egypt, he did not bring them out of Egypt and give them homes in the wilderness. He brought them out of Egypt, and they had temporary dwelling places in the wilderness. Okay, this is a stop. Matter of fact, they had 42 of them. So this is a stop. This is a coming out, and this is a temporary thing. And this is what the Father is telling them. This is a temporary thing. And all of you are to dwell in Sukkot so that you know this is what I did. Okay, and what was the purpose of bringing them through the wilderness? Remember, guys, they brought them through the wilderness first thing to bring them to himself, to bring them to the mountain, so he could reveal his desires and his word for them, and then to equip them to go into the promise. Okay? So they dwelt in Sukkot the time they were in the wilderness, but when they got into the land, then they started getting into the houses and the different things there, the permanent structures, right? So the Father is saying, I don't want you to ever forget what I have done for you and where I have brought you from. So what I want you to do is every year in this time, I want you to dwell in Sukkot so that all the generations will know this is what I have done for you, and this was my heart's desire for you, that even in the midst of the wilderness, I still protect you, and I am your God. Okay? Because oftentimes, we kind of forget that. I mean, we see so many places in Scripture where it says, I am Adonai your God. Why would he have to say that? Because at times, we forget. I mean, really, how dare we say that we forget that he is God? But at times we don't live like it. And we need to be reminded that sometimes our actions are not serving him, are not worshiping him, are not being given to him. And so we need reminded of that from time to time. Maybe we act selfishly. I know we never do that, right? God forbid, we never act selfishly. We never act like that. But maybe we need reminded from time to time that God is asking us to do something, even if we don't understand it, for no other reason because he redeemed us. Think about that. If he redeemed us, what does redeem mean? Purchase. If he redeemed us, that means he has the right to say what he wants to us. So if he redeemed us, he can tell us what to do. Either that, or maybe we haven't given ourselves to be redeemed. Deuteronomy 23:14 says, "For the Lord your God walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and to give up your enemies before you. Therefore shall your camp be holy, and that he see no unclean thing in you and turn away from you." So again, this is the idea of he dwells in the midst of the camp. So during the time of Sukkot, while we're indwelling in temporary dwellings in Sukkot, let us not forget that the Lord our God is in the midst of us. And that he does dwell in the midst of our camp. Right? Because what would happen, so we all go out, and we're all going to go camping. No air conditioner. No quick access to daily shower, food rations, unless you guys are marvelous hunters. And let's just see how brotherly we can be toward one another. Let us not forget that in the midst of dwelling together, that the Lord our God walks in the midst of our camp, and let him not see any unclean thing in us. Notice he doesn't just say any unclean thing around us. It's no unclean thing in us. That reveals our hearts. Okay? So the first thing we need to learn after we have been redeemed is how to dwell with Yahweh, obviously, but it doesn't stop there. Then we need to learn how to dwell with, dare I say it, each other. Because there's so many places, and it's just the attitude is common, you know, when we're redeemed, this is an awesome, and it's just a marvelous relationship, and wow, look how great God is, and then we kind of quickly get pulled down when something happens between us and our neighbor, right? And then we kind of can say, well, that's it, God, it's just me and you. Wrong. Because Scripture says if we love him, we will love what he loves, which happens to be your neighbor. Plus, you kind of were commanded to love them too. Oh, shucks, right? So we need to learn, if we're going to learn to dwell with him, we need to learn to dwell with each other. Guys, a lot of times we can see a good testimony of our relationship with the Lord our God with how we treat each other. We look in Exodus 12:36. So Adonai made the Egyptians so favorably disposed toward the people that they had let them have whatever they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. Can you imagine being plundered without raising a sword? They just said, hey, you know that gold? They're like, take it. just we've had enough. Get out, right? What's the next verse say? So the people of Israel traveled from Ramses to where? Sukkot. Some 600,000 men on foot, not counting the children. So the very first place he brought them to outside of Egypt was a place called Sukkot. Think about that. You think the Father's trying to tell us something? That as soon as they come out of Egypt, they had to learn how to dwell together? Because there's a long trip ahead of them. And they need to learn to dwell together. And Hinei Matov, y'all. Right? They need to learn to dwell with one another and to get along with one another and to have that unity towards one another. And they need to learn to do this. Because if it truly is, we know the destination, but if our life here is not about the destination, if our life here is about the journey, why are we going to have a miserable journey? Let's learn to dwell with one another. Plus, kind of throw this other thing in there too. If we truly are going to be with him forever, then that means, oh, look around you. You're kind of going to be with each other forever too. You might as well learn to get along now. Right? Okay, so how do we celebrate? A couple things. One, Build a sukkah and dwell in it. Yeah, build a sukkah and dwell in it. Okay? We read Leviticus 23:42 says, "And you shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths." And that word for booths is sukkot. Okay, you shall dwell in sukkot. So if you're not one of these that actually go out and they're camping and doing these things, whatever, build a sukkah on your property and dwell in it. Go eat. Have a meal. Do your morning coffee out there. Well, I don't do coffee. I don't want to talk to you. Go out and have your morning devotions out there. Go out and spend time in the Word. Go out and dwell. Be with Him. Have that fellowship in there. Invite people out to the sukkah with you, and you can be hot and sweat together. I mean, it's a great time, right? This is what we're looking at. So, and remember, the point of all this is, even in the temporary things of life, He is the Lord our God. He will bring us through. He will point us to the destination. And this is a time that is said, this is temporary, but it points us toward the eternal. Right? We built a sukkah. This was one of them that we did one year, a while back. And this is cool. We actually still have this one. So this is just one example here. Inside the sukkah, we had a table with all different kinds of fruit and everything on it. And why? Because as you celebrate things in Israel, we talk about the different species that grow in Israel. So we always try to bring some of the fruit that grows in Israel. We can't always get it, but we try, just to kind of have fun with it. And that way everyone can kind of go out and they can eat a little bit out there in the sukkah. We can dwell in the sukkah, and they have access to it, every day. Guys, if you go to Jerusalem during the time of Sukkot, wow. They're building sukkahs on top of the roof. Because they'd like that one. They're building sukkahs all over the place. It's amazing. If you can get this much room, they're building a sukkah there. It's wild. But it's beautiful. Because you see people in their desire just to honor the King and just to spend that special time with Him. If for no other reason, make the sukkah your prayer closet for a week. It's a good place to do it. What else do we do? You shake a lulav. What? A lulav shake. Well, how's that taste? Well, a lulav? What's a lulav? Well, that's got to be a tradition, right? That's got to be something that can't be in Scripture, right? What do you mean shake it? It is. And this is something where the Father is using something to reveal to us. Take a look at a couple. Leviticus 23:40. "And you shall take of the first day the boughs of goodly trees, the branches of palm trees, the boughs of fig trees, and the willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days." So we have here where it says, take on the first day the boughs or the fruit of goodly trees. The word here for goodly trees is hadar. Okay, of a hadar tree. Okay, I'll show why that's important here in a minute. And the branches of the palm, that's tamar. So that's the palm frond. Okay, so that's the branches of the palm. And the boughs, the anaf, for the covering of the twigs of the thick entwined trees, these are myrtle. Okay, so this is a myrtle. And then the willows, the willows of the brook. So it's the willows, the myrtle, the palm frond, and some kind of fruit off this hadar tree. So what's that? Okay, this is together called Aramanim, the 4 species. Okay? They all relate to us. And each aspect of us that is revealing a part of us to us. And sometimes we need that. Right? The ETROG and the lulav are like a person. Okay? The palm frond is like a backbone. You take the palm frond, it's this really long palm frond. It looks like a spine, looks like a backbone. Okay? These are what we're looking at. So this is this right here. Okay? The myrtle looks like eyes. So the palm frond, tamar even means to be upright. Okay? So the palm frond stands for to be upright. And then the myrtle, like the eyes. Well, guys, what are we told to do with our eyes? Again, these things relate to the Scripture, what the Father's calling us to, the things that we see. Be careful of these things, right? Here's something with myrtle. You have to have water for these, right? And even the willows by the brook, water. You know, if you ever plant a willow tree, what do the roots do? I mean, this sounds kind of stupid, right? Well, the roots seek out water. Well, duh, but guys, especially a willow tree, right? Because it will, if there's water anywhere in the area, it's going to tap it, okay? Because if you've ever seen the willow and it's got these things, well, the root system often is larger than what you see, okay? So, again, the myrtle look like eyes, being what we set our eyes on and what we set our eyes to. The willow looks like a mouth. You don't know how tempted I was to do that Mick Jagger thing, you know. Oh, anyway, so the willow looks like a mouth, and the idea is the things that we speak, may they be words of living water, words of life, that which refreshes. Okay? The ETROG, I'm going to spend more time on this one. The ETROG, it looks like a heart. How many scriptures can we find in relationship to the heart? Especially ones like, guard your heart, for out of it flow the issues of life. Guard your heart. Protect your heart. Don't follow your own heart. Follow the Word. Right? There's so many places we see in this. And this right here reminds us of so many ways about our heart and how we should treat it and what we should do with it. Let's look at a couple things. One, if you slice it, how many of you guys seen the movie Cuisine? If you slice it, you'll notice something weird, okay? It's a citrus. It smells kind of like a lemon, but it's a lot sweeter than a lemon, okay? But it's shaped like a heart, but it has a very thick skin. There's a lot of skin, a very thick skin around the actual fruit, but it bruises very easily. Okay, how many of you guys think that you are thick-skinned? You ever heard the expression? What does that mean? You say, you just need to get a thick skin. What does that mean? Don't be so offended so easily. But here's the problem. We do. And so while we say we have a thick skin, at the same time, we really do bruise easily. And we really do take these things and it affects us very easily. Okay? But the inside of it, there's a lot of seeds inside of it. Okay, more than you would just find in a regular lemon. There's a lot of seeds. So inside of it, you have the ability to create much fruit from this. You have the means to have good fruit and to spread that fruit and to plant these seeds all over the place. So be careful with how you treat it, because not only do you have this here, but you have within it the means to have more. Right? More like planting seeds of life. Let them grow wherever they are, right? Okay, so here's something else. The ETROG tree cannot be grafted with any other fruit tree. There are some trees where you can graft and different fruits and type of things that you can do. You cannot do this with an ETROG. Okay? Great care has to be to protect this fruit. Like we said, it bruises very easily. And on the tree itself, there's a lot of thorns. Guys, that's the flesh. That's us, the old life, the old nature, the old desires, those things that we think we got rid of, but maybe we haven't. So there are times when the slightest bit of wind that blows, the tree itself can beat up its own fruit. Do we ever do that? At the slightest little thing, we kind of beat ourselves up about things, and we've got this, and here's these thorns, and we're supposed to guard our heart, but instead we're kind of like poking it, aggravating, doing stuff. Be careful, because if we allow the things of the tree or our regular life itself, if we allow these things to go without being checked, we can damage what we're supposed to be protecting. Here's something else. The ETROG requires a lot of water. I mean, a lot of water. The problem is, when you have crops that do this, they often turn on these sprinkler systems and these really big systems that spread a lot of water. You can't do that with this. Actually, in the process of watering, and if you're not careful, you can damage the fruit. So when you have these trees that are out there, you'll see they'll have drips. Your drip lines all. all over the place. Or better yet, they'll hand water. Great care is taken to this. So, the word ETROG is Aramaic. All right? It's Aramaic. The word means delightful. The English equivalent is citron. How many of you have heard citron? You may not have heard ETROG, but you may have heard citron. Okay? Citron is from the Greek kedros, which is the same for the Hebrew word hadar. So follow that. Kedros was Latinized as cedrus, which evolved to citrus, and then citron. So when the scripture says to take of these hadar trees, is it any delightful tree, or is it talking about a certain type of tree? Think about that. Okay, in Second Temple times, the ETROG was the only known citrus fruit in the area. So if this was the only known citrus fruit in the area, what would they have used? That's not a hard stretch, is it? It would have been the choice for sukkot. This would have been what would have used. So look at this as well. The word ETROG, or hadar rather, can also be rendered as hadir. Hadir is a sheep pen. Well, what's the significance of that? Well, in a sheep pen, do they separate the sheep by age? No. All the sheep are in the pen, right? The ones that are just born and those that have been there and the old and all ages in between, they're all in the pen together. You know what else is interesting about at the ETROG tree? That on the tree, you have fruit in all different stages of its production. So while on the same tree, you can have mature fruit, you can also have fruit that is just starting to bud and come on. So on the same tree, you have all stages of life. Just like in a sheep pen. They're all in all stages of life in there together. Makes me think of things where we talk about in Scripture that says, so we have the trees and they gave fruit in the seasons pretty much constantly. Each month they gave fruit. Each time they gave fruit. So this is what we're looking at. Things like that. That means that while you have something that is mature, you can have something that is new. Now think about our congregations and assemblies. We have some people that have been doing this a long time and some that haven't, but yet we are supposed to be part of the same tree and dwelling together, right? So we're all part of the same sheep pen. Okay, what else? The tree it grows on has thorns, so the fruit has to be monitored. That's kind of like shepherding. It has thorns, so it constantly has to be monitored and tended to make sure that the thorns do not mark the fruit. We're supposed to give good fruit, right? So what happens if there's thorns and the tree keeps growing and it's like these thorns are coming around and it keeps going after the fruit? What's going to end up to that branch that keeps going after the fruit? It's going to get pruned. Pruning's never fun, is it? So this is what it is. It has to be protected. It has to be guarded, right? The tree requires a lot of water to produce good fruit, and the tree and the fruit require sunlight. So it requires water and requires light. So I'm thinking the living water and the light of life. Right? He is the water, he is the light. These are the things that we're looking at for our heart, that we can live, right? A lot of the trees, like I said, are also watered manually, so that even the irrigation doesn't upset it. Okay? The ETROG used in the mitzvah of the four species must be largely unblemished, with the fewest black specks or other flaws. Extra special care is needed to cut around the leaves and the thorns so that it may scratch the fruit. It is also important to protect the fruit-bearing trees, look at this, from dust and carbon. What are you made from? And God made Adam from the flesh. So great care has to be given to protect the tree from the flesh, the dust, and carbon. Because the slightest speck of carbon can get in there, and as it starts to grow, it'll make this really big black dot on the fruit. One little speck can cause this really big blemish. Again, guard your heart. right? The four species represent us as individuals, but also as a people, okay? All parts are needed to make a body whole. The eyes, the mouth, the spine, the heart, all parts needed to make the body whole. Just like us as a people together, we all come together to be whole before Him. None of us have all the answers, but all of us together have a good shot. Right? All together they symbolize the whole man, the entire community. And they symbolize unity. Because by themselves, they're not much. But together, they have a purpose. You know, like we read, Shaul said, you know, how can one say to another, we don't need you? Right? Ephesians 4 says this, under His control, the whole body is being fitted and held together by the support of every joint, with each part doing what? Working to fulfill its function. This is how the body grows and builds itself up in love. So when we're together and we're one body, what are we supposed to do? It says you are to take these four things and you are to rejoice before the Lord your God. And this is where they come up with the shake and the wave. It's just a matter of rejoicing. That's what you're told to do with it. Take it and rejoice. Here's the thing, guys. To rejoice looks different with everybody. Okay? But you rejoice before the Lord your God as you present yourself to Him. Again, it's one of those things where sometimes we have to see it to get it. Right? Psalm 104 says this, I will sing to the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praise to my God while I have my being. Why don't we sing praise now? Because we're going to be doing it for a very long time. Right? What are the prophetic implications? Because it is a very prophetic festival. The prophetic implications. Well, it's called the Feast of Ingathering. That should tell us something. The Feast of Ingathering. Well, why is it called that? Well, here we go. Leviticus 23. So in the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have what? Gathered in the fruit of the land. We've already addressed how the fruit of the land symbolizes you. So when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days. So on the first day shall be a Sabbath, on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. So this also represents the gathering of the people. The gathering of the Aramanim, the four species, it represents gathering in of all of His people from the north, south, east, and west. All coming together. And this is why it's also called Season of Our Joy. Because what happens when we come before Him? Is it going to be a quiet day? No. It's going to be a day of joy and a day of rejoicing. And I bet it's going to last for more than a day. This is just one example of what we look at in Jerusalem during the Feast of Sukkot. And notice they're all holding of the four species and then the rejoicing with the Torah. Because what are we going to do when we're there? We're going to rejoice with the Lord. Right? Here's another. Awesome stuff. So Acts 15:13. Or actually 13 through 17 if you want to read it. But I'm actually going to start on verse 16. After this I will return and I will do what? Rebuild the fallen tent of David, and I will rebuild its ruins, and I will restore it. So we often say, I will go and I will rebuild the fallen tent of David. My question is this word tent, temple, what's the word? And what's the purpose? Verse 17. So that the rest of mankind may seek the Lord, that is, all the nations, all the goyim that have been called by my name. If you look at this, he says, in that day I will raise up the Amos tabernacle of David. Aleph Taf, Sukkot David. The Aleph Taf, Sukkah of David. Wow. The Sukkah of David, it was open so people could come. What's a Sukkah? A Sukkah is not completely closed so that people can come. What about rain? Think about this. What about rain? What's the connection between Sukkot and rain? Because there is one. Look at Zechariah. Zechariah 14, starting in verse 16. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations, so that says something, doesn't it? When all those that are left, that means there's a lot that are not going to be there, right? So are we talking about a time that we've had yet? No, we're not talking about, this is prophetic, okay? So it shall come to pass after everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to do what? Keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. There's a connection between the blessing of rain and dwelling with your Lord. Verse 18, and if the family of Egypt go not up and come not that have no rain, there shall be plague. Well, yeah, if there's no rain, there's going to be plague, right? And there shall be plague, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. You know, you go to Isaiah, where it talks about the new heavens and the new earth, where it even talks about Sabbath after Sabbath, Rosh Chodesh to Rosh Chodesh. All flesh will come and worship. It's just another thing. Where if they're important to the Father in a time yet to be, and they were important to him when they were given, why are they not important now? And that's the problem. They are. Right? So when we read about Sukkot, and we say, well, it's 8 days, but it's not exactly 8 days, because when we read through the scripture, it says it's 7 days, and then on the 8th day. So in essence, it's one thing, but it's separated out into two different parts. So for 7 days, you were to keep the festival before the Lord your God, and on the 8th day, you will have a gathering. What happened in this time? There was a water pouring out ceremony on the last day, okay? Look at this in John 7. John 7:37. So on the last day of the feast, Hoshana Rabbah, this is during Sukkot, guys. Hoshana Rabbah is the great day, the last day, okay? Hoshana Rabbah, Yeshua stood and cried out, if anyone is thirsty, let him come and drink. And he who believes in me, as the scripture said, from him will flow rivers of living water. Well, what's the rivers of living water? What's the river of life? What's the river of life? We see Ezekiel 47. So he brought me back to the entrance of the house. What's the house? The temple. And I saw water flowing eastward from under the threshold of the house, for the house faced east. And the water flowed down from under the right side of the house, south of the altar. We also see in Revelation 22 where this river originate from the throne. Because we see the angel showed me the river of water of life, sparkling like crystal, flowing from where? The throne of God and of the Lamb. So the river of life flows from the throne of God. It flowed eastward through the temple and flowed out through the people. And that's that same river of life that's supposed to be dwelling through you. Look at this. Revelation 21:2. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready like a bride adorned for her husband. Faith was talking about that. And I heard a loud voice out of heaven saying, behold, God's dwelling is with his people. His dwelling. What's dwelling? Dwelling is you were supposed to in this time dwell in Sukkot, right? And his dwelling was with his people, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. And he will wipe away from them every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more, neither will there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, and because the first things have passed away. So, why would Yeshua choose this time to cry out about living water? Was it just some random thing because he liked going around yelling out random stuff, right? It was like his version of Twitter. He's just going around saying, you know, hey, guess what, guys? I just had this awesome sandwich down the road. Not quite. Why would he choose this time to say this? Because he was using what the people were doing to reveal himself. There was a water libation ceremony in the temple. It was at this time. And as they're pouring out the water, they're praying that God would send water. It's a matter of they poured out what they needed. And it's because of that which was in Zechariah, right? So they're honoring the feast. They're keeping these times, and they know that if they keep these times, that God said he will send them the right rain at the right time. He will give them the rain that they need if they do this. So they're pouring this out, and they're praying for rain. They're praying for the water of life. So what happens? How did they do this? Okay, well, During the Feast of Sukkot, there was a lot of offerings that were brought during the time. Okay, the temple was illuminated by 4 gold lampstands. They were stationed in the court of the women, and each of the lampstand had 4 golden bowls, and there was a water pouring out ceremony at the altar. So it's not just like he stood up and said something random. There was something happening at the time. What was happening? This is what was happening. A gold vessel of water was filled from the pool of Siloam, and then was taken to the altar. Another gold vessel was filled with wine. And these 2 would be poured out together, so that water and wine would be flowing on the altar. What's the significance of that? The water and the wine would flow down a conduit, and it would be carried to the Kidron Brook, and the priests would be praying for Yahweh to provide the people with water and life at the appropriate time. When they came, when Yeshua was on the cross, crucifixion stake, when he was there, they pierced him. And it said, out came forth blood and water. Guys, if you know anything about how many of you have read the medical account of the crucifixion? There should not have been much blood left in his body, let alone water. But there was something that was being said here when they pierced him, and blood and water flowed. Guys, what is the purpose of water through Scripture? Not only does it give life, but it is the water that mikvahs. It is the water that takes something that is unclean to wash, to be made clean. And now that it is taken, it is clean, it is given the blood to take it from clean to holy and to be presented before the Lord our God. And so here he's saying, when it was pierced, blood and water flowed. So here they are, they're at the altar, and they're pouring out blood and water at the altar. Now guys, this is a tradition. But guys, Yeshua used this tradition to reveal himself. Not all traditions are bad. It's in the last day, the great day of the feast. They're pouring out blood and water, in essence. They're pouring out the water and the wine. They're crying out for the Lord to give them life, to give them what they need at the right time. We are helpless without you. We rely on you, Lord our God, for our very existence. And Yeshua says, if you want water, if you want life, here it is. That's amazing. He's revealing himself. And this is what we're talking about in the time of Sukkot. To be with him. For how long? Guys, 7 days is a cycle. What's 8? A new beginning. Notice, then you don't keep counting anymore. 7 days, and then the 8th day. It doesn't say, and then on the 9th. No, 7 days, and then the 8th day. New cycle, new beginning, new time, new season. Forever. Eternity. To be with him. And Yeshua said, if any man thirst, let him come to me and drink. And he that believes on me, as the scripture said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of water. Amen? Amen. Amen. Let's all stand. So let us keep the feast with joy in our hearts and in our lives. Numbers chapter 6. Yahweh told Moses and Aaron that when you bless my children, I shall place my name upon them and give them peace. And when you bless them, you shall bless them like this.
Yivarechecha Yahweh vayishmerecha Yahweh panav ilecha vichunecha Yisa Yahweh panav ilecha v'yasem lecha. 'Shalom. 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 ' May Yahweh now bless you and keep you. May his face now shine upon you. May you show forth the light of his countenance, and may he give you his peace.